Right, hi, I'm Dan Hardacre. I'm Head of Digital Design here at Procter & Stevenson. And as an integrated marketing and technology agency, we've many clients around the world who work on multiple digital projects. And those digital projects can kind of range really from online brand creation through to development and enterprise level web design. Now, as a priority, we are delivering world-class web design, and we are always looking at opportunities to make sure it's scalable across different businesses or organizations, and obviously making those opportunities cost-effective and future-proofed. I'm going to talk to you about three of those kind of challenges we find and many processes we work through today. And those processes are semantic naming. And that's where we are going to talk to you about how we can teach the whole team to communicate better. And that's from stakeholders all the way through to testers. Then we have atomic design. And that's about how we can bring consistency to your website and designing it from the ground up. And then finally, we're going to talk a bit about motion design. And that is the best way to bring finesse and personality to your website. So let's start with semantic naming. And some of you might know what this is and others of you won't, but semantics, they generally refer to the logic and the meaning in words. There could be phrases, text, and those kinds of meanings, they can change. They can be dependent upon a particular context or application. I'm going to show you a couple of scenarios in a second. They are the same word and they're going to be in three different languages. They're going to mean the same thing, but I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I'm going to say, if I ask you to throw this in the bin, would you know what I mean? So the first example I'm going to show you is Hindi. So here we have a word in Hindi, and maybe let's say 2 or 3 of you out of everyone listening today understand the language. Now, you guys can communicate amongst yourselves and on what that item is, but the rest of us, we've no idea what it is you're referring to. So let's put in the next language. So we've got Japanese. So let's say another 2 or 3 of you might be able to read Japanese. And again, we've kind of got the same issue as we had before. You can communicate with each other on what that item is. However, the rest of us have no idea what that is. And to make things worse, we've now kind of got 2 languages and we're talking about the same thing. So communication is becoming a big breakdown here. So let's pull in that third language. So we've got French. And let's say maybe 40 or 50% of you now know what I'm asking you to throw in the bin. We've got the same issue as before, but what's really important now is that we are really trying to communicate about that same item, and none of us can. And if you put that simply, we don't have a common language. Now, everyone, when we are designing, building, developing, must be using the same common language. Now, if I asked you to throw this into the bin, I'm guessing that maybe 99.9% of you now know what it is we're talking about. So there's 2 things that are happening here. The first one is picture superiority effect, and that is where we can relate to an image much better than we can text. And the second one is tapping into semantic memory. So when we were growing up, we learned what an apple is, what it tastes like, what it feels like, but most importantly, what it looks like. So every time we see an apple, we are able to use that knowledge. It's just sitting there waiting for us to use it time and time again. We don't have to learn it over and over. So you're probably wondering, how do semantics and imagery make a good communication tool? We've got developers, content editors, designers, stakeholders. When we are designing and building websites that are all looking to achieve the same element or talk about the same element within a project. The answer here to be able to achieve this is finding a pattern theme and finding a common language for all. So commonly, semantics are often used by developers, and they're often used in the world of artificial intelligence, and that comes through using natural language in processing. So let's take some code here. So not all code is written semantically, just like we're seeing on the right-hand side. We've got hundreds of classes in here, and only the developer really knows what it is that we're referring to. There's no reference here for us to work from. Let's turn that into something which is now written semantically. So when it's written semantically, it can make a little bit more sense. This is now clearly referenced in that it's a hero image. It's an element on the web page. So we now know its location. We also know what's inside of that. We know that there is a title and that there is a tagline. It's good, but it doesn't really reference the design. It doesn't tell me what font choice this is or what color or the function of it. I just know that there is a title and a tagline. So we can kind of go another step further here. We can look at creating semantics against hundreds of variations of patterns when we're designing a website. And again, this is really going to help a content editor, a designer and developer communicate and refer to the right pattern. Here, what I've done is I've created a collection of CTA patterns, and each has been given a name that refers to a topic. And I've given these topics superheroes or film names. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to create a link between the pattern and the naming of that pattern. So you could create a good connection. So let's give you an example. Let's take that CTA at the bottom in the center. It's called Batman and Robin. I've called it Batman and Robin because the image on the left-hand side is bigger than the one on the right-hand side, and it's a little bit like a superhero and his sidekick. Let's take the CTA in the center, which is referenced Hulk. There's a little button on that right-hand side that if I click or engage with it, that CTA block then gets bigger. It shows me more information. And it's the same with the Hulk. When he gets angry, he gets bigger, he gets larger. So use another pattern reference. So we've got the Spider-Man, he's on the right-hand side, and there's 5 different CTA areas coming off that. And it's a little bit like Spider-Man in his web. When he's firing out a web, you get different strands coming off it. Now let's change these references to numbers. I'm going to let you look at these for about 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and turn them off. So if I said to you which pattern was number 1, I don't know, maybe 20% to 50% of you might know what it is that I'm referring to. If I said which one was number 3 or 8. But if I said to you which one was Batman and Robin, I'm guessing that actually more of you are going to understand which pattern it is I'm referring to, or the Hulk, for example. If I said which one was the Hulk, we could probably give me a good description around it. So based on that semantic information that I gave you, you've been able to create a connection to those patterns. And I'm sure if I gave you the details around all those different other patterns that, you'd be able to remember those just as easily rather than using a naming convention. So not only is that a great way to improve communication within a team, but it's quite a fun process as well. You could be doing a stand-up and the fun you can have when you're talking about, oh yeah, I'd like a Hulk and a Spider-Man or a Batman. It's a great way of communicating. But what's really interesting is for stakeholders. It can really start to show how passionate the team are around the project. Anyway, so that's talking about finding a common language, and we talked a little bit about patterns there. But how do we create those patterns and keep consistency? And this is really where atomic design comes in. So websites, they're getting larger, they're getting more complex, they've got more information, and they're really fighting to try and remain relevant. And today it's pretty commonplace to have hundreds of pages featuring thousands of products. So while trying to grow your online presence is great for business, it can really be a bit of a challenge in terms of keeping consistency. And what is good for business can often be bad for a brand. So let's say you want to make a quick change to a website. It can be quite time consuming. Something can be missed, or something that you think is quite small and easy to change at first can actually over time become or make your website turn into a bit of a Frankenstein. So there's an approach we can take, which is atomic design. And what it does is it has reuse at its core. Now, this is a method from Brainchild called Brad Frost. And the method really allows you to create consistency from the very beginning of a project. So the terminology borrows itself from biology, and you've probably heard these kinds of terminologies before at school. And if I break them down into web terms for you, if we take an atom, for example, that's looking at the smallest element on a website, and it can only be affected by itself. So it's something like a button, a font, or a color, or maybe an image. Now, if you take 2 atoms and you combine them together, we create what's called a molecule. And a molecule can then start to be consisted of a hero, a navigation, or an alert. And again, it's still reusable and it's still nestable. Now, if you take a couple of molecules or a molecule and an atom and you combine them together, you create an organism. Now, a group of atoms and molecules becomes something a little bit more specific. So yeah, like that is a header, a footer, or a stack form. Now, it's great. We've got all of the building blocks to build out a website. but we then need to bring them into a template. And most of you will refer to website designers having templates behind them. And these are the glue. This is what holds all of our components together. Now you can have one template, you can have multiple templates, but it's not what holds the information. This is where we move on to pages. So pages is where we have the content. This is where we upload your image, which is where we bring in the copy. So let's break Atomic Design down into some more reference material. So here we've got 3 atoms, and those atoms, starting with the left-hand side, is a title. It's telling me this is search the site. The second atom is a form field, so we can add something into a form field here. And then the one on the right is a button. If we combine those together, we create a molecule. And now this is something which is usable on the site. I can actually know what this function is. If I combine this now with an image, creates an organism. Now I can make that image bigger, I can make it smaller, I can shift it to the left, to the right, and I can create patterns from it. But if I wanted to change that button and I wanted to make it yellow, I wouldn't change it here because I'd be making an isolated change. I go back to atom level, I make the change back there, and that is where I would make it yellow, and that would have a knock-on effect throughout the rest of the site. So what are the benefits of atomic design? Well, it can save time, it can save resource, it really improves consistency. Sites are fully flexible and you can scale them up or down. But what's really important is the process for design changes and brand changes. They can be adapted very, very quickly if we take this methodology. So finally, let's talk about motion design. So we've got a great website. It's really easy to navigate, it's beautifully laid out, it's scalable through atomic design, and it's semantically named. But you can still make your user experience better, and that is with motion design. Motion design is when websites elements, they have an action or a bit of movement. So let's add an item to a shopping cart and that icon changes, it moves up to the top right-hand corner, or there's an indication to do the next step, swipe up, move to the left, move to the right. It's also usable across different devices. It might be a small part of your website process, but it can have a huge impact on a user experience. But motion design, it has 2 clear principles. The first one is being informative. Motion can show your website users where an interaction can take place. It can provide clues and actions of what's available or what can happen if this action is taken. But if you put it simply, motion design focuses on your website visitors' attention. It's on what is important without distracting them. So you might have seen in that little example, this movie that's playing now, there was an indication where if you put your keypad reference of your phone in, when it said no, it moved to the left-hand side in the same way as saying, here we go, left or right. It's no. If I get it right, it's moving up and down. It's small indications like that that can really help be informative, know if you've done something right. So the second one is personality, and motion cues can add character to your website. Now this might celebrate a particular moment within the user journey. So it could be waiting for a loading time for something to happen. It can add personality or style to your layout. It can reinforce your brand image, and that could be whether it's a bit playful and bouncy or whether it's smooth and sophisticated. But really, what makes good motion design? Now, as a rule, it's there to not distract or confuse. And for that reason, it should always use real world forces. So let's say if I had a ball in my hand and I dropped it on the floor, the ball wouldn't just hit the ground, it would bounce a little bit and then it would start to roll in the direction of the way the land lies. But in terms of web design, I've got a couple of references here for you to see. On the left-hand side, we've got a good example. We've got a good example. It's clear, it's quick, it's undistracting. It sits on top of the information and pushes the focus to the front. Let's see a bad example. Bad example is where we've got information moving out of the way for this information to then come in place. It's unnecessary, it's unintentional, and the pace of it is a little bit slower as well. Here's another example. On the left-hand side, we've got a quick, well, fast-paced, but what's really interesting here, it's indicating me to want to hit that like icon. Let's look at the bad example. The bad example is the information is moving all over the place. I don't know which direction content's coming in, what it's asking me to do. So you should never stagger or slow movement on a website. You just shouldn't have to wait for an animation to finish. Now, those two clear examples are that motion should never move in different directions or cross paths. So here we've got some more examples of those principles used against different brands. It should always be aware of the user and other elements surrounding it, and it should be choreographed accordingly. But finally, motion should be intentional. All movement should direct the user to the right place at the right time, drawing attention from other elements and other distractions that can kind of pull them off course. And that's it. If you get all of this right, you can use motion design to really encourage a specific action on your site. It can tell a story and it can reveal your brand's character and really improve your user experience. Now, they're just three really light touches on three really quite complicated elements we do here at Proctor's. These principles, they're not brand new. They've been developed, they've been tried, they've been tested, and they are proven to work. You know, they're not really theoretical methods that would, you know, kind of be nice to work with, and they don't really work in the real world. They're all about as much around client communication, client education, and engagement in projects as they are about the best design practices you can bring in kind of development methodologies. So really, no matter what industry you're in and coming from, you'll always need to adopt these methods into your workflows to really offer your clients and your customers the best available solutions. Great, so that's it from me. I don't know if we've got any questions.
Thanks so much, Dan. Yeah, we've had some brilliant questions submitted. We're not going to have time to go back we're not going to have time to answer each of them, but we will come back to everyone individually for the ones we don't have time. So jumping straight in, the first question we got is, I could see this approach working well for large companies, but what about smaller companies that are striving to have a more consistency in their brand?
Okay, so it's a completely scalable solution. So what we tend to do, because us being an agency, we can work with multiple companies with different scales and different sizes. So we've always had to look at being able to adapt this approach. Now, most approaches we will take with this kind of thing in terms of atomic design, let's say, is we work with an MVP approach. So let's look at what you really need to start off with. And that means building patterns, a small amount of patterns at the start. We can add to those because it's future-proof. We're not designing pages, we're not designing pages that are going to hold a specific amount of content. We're looking at creating patterns that can hold content. It becomes a completely scalable solution. I hope that kind of answers it.
Brill, okay, so thanks for that. Next one. Can you use this approach when you have your own development team in-house?
Yeah, okay, cool. That's another good question. I've often asked that scenario here as well. We get teams coming in who have their own front-end teams and really want to use their own methods. But yeah, essentially we can. We've, again, using the atomic design process, we can share elements, designs, and everything we work with is based online anyway. So we use tools like InVision to be able to share that content and show how things can move. And we build prototypes and we share those prototypes with the development team. We have our own development team here, so we're always in constant conversation with making sure we know what's achievable, what's challenging. So our recommendations then when we're working with external agencies are proven and they will work.
Great, okay, I think we've probably got time for a couple more. So another one here is, if I wanted to refresh my site rather than start again from scratch, does this method work or does it only apply to a complete redesign?
Yeah, so again, this is the great thing with atomic design. If you are updating your brand, let's say, I think I gave the scenario, we had a grey button within the presentation I was talking about, and I said, let's change that. You don't normally just change the color of a button. There's normally a reason around it, which is obviously like a brand change. So yeah, we can absolutely adopt new brands and brand refreshes. And that is basically taking you back down to atomic level. So you've got a new font. We go through all the H1 references, 2, 3, body copy, all of the elements that sit at atomic level, we then change. as part of that new brand, and then we move forward from there. Now, there may be some kind of UX decisions that we might need to make kind of changes to based on persona development, that kind of thing. And those patterns then can be modified. But essentially, we change everything at atom level, and we see where we can go from there. If we need to start changing organisms and molecules, we will do.
Perfect. Okay, I think we've got time for just one last question. So just looking here, we've got, can I use motion design? Sorry, can motion design be used in isolation, or does the process only work if I follow the first two principles as well?
No. Okay. So yeah, again, something that can work in isolation. So motion design obviously works against the brand. We understand what the brand is trying to achieve to make sure that we get those elements right. But again, working through atomic design is getting the structure right. Bringing in motion after that is something that we can introduce. So when we're talking about a hover state, we may just want it to flash on and off. It's kind of the standard way of cursor activity, but we might want to fade or transition on that using different front-end technologies. That's where we can start to introduce it. And obviously, there's lots more we can build on that, and setting skills and designs around how a page loads. So pagination and parallax effects, it can all be done in isolation.
Great, thank you so much for that. I think we probably have to wrap up there, but as I said, we will be coming back to people individually to answer a few more of your questions. So thank you everyone for submitting those. We have recorded this session, so we will be following up with everyone with a recording. So yeah, watch this space, and thank you all again for making the time to attend, and wish you all a great afternoon. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you.